Hello, I produce music under the name Avatar One. I've had a number of releases out since 2000, going back to 2008, on labels such as Perfecto, Black Hole, Cult, System Recordings, Bonsai. I've remixed people like BT, Kirsty Hawkshaw, Tiff Lacey, Andrea Britton, and I've worked with producers like Airwave, and I've also done some ghostwriting for other people. I've had a number of requests on my Facebook page asking me to make some tutorials showing how I produce dance music in Studio One Pro. So I thought I'd start to do that, starting with this video here. First of all, I don't consider myself to be an expert in any of this, so this is just what works for me. And I know that there are many videos on YouTube which do similar things, but I thought that on this particular tutorial I'd talk about my creative process, so how I go out about making a track, where I get my ideas from, how I put them down, that sort of thing. 90% of which is rubbish and 10% of which is passable in terms of my ideas. So I thought I'd start with this tune that I'm starting to work on over the last couple of days, called Open Up 2014. It features the vocals of Alexandra Green. It's a liquid drum and bass track. I decided to start on this one because it's quite simple. As you can see, there aren't too many tracks in this. It's quite simple, so hopefully I'll be able to explain it quite easily. We'll go on to progressive trance and progressive house in later videos. Now, I've only got about 2 minutes of this tune done, so in later videos we'll sort of carry on with this tune, and hopefully I'll finish it, and we'll see how it changes along the way, if it does. Anyway, so I'll play it first and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Okay, so that's what I've got so far. The first thing I want to say is that when I produce, I mix as I go along, so I don't really arrange and then mix at the end. That doesn't work for me. But I do master as a completely separate process. So you can see my main channel here, the master channel. There's nothing on it at all. There's no compressor, there's no EQ, there's nothing. The only thing I've got on it is a spectrum meter, just so I can check the shape of the audio, which I like to do along with listening to it. So the first thing, so talking about my creative process really, and how I got started on the track and things like that. The first thing is that the last track I worked on was a progressive house track, 128 beats per minute, and I felt like doing something completely different. So I decided to go and have a look at the vocals to a track I did in 2008 called Open Up, which was actually my first release with Alexandra Green. To be honest, the production values on that aren't too good, really. It was the first track I did. I'd only been producing for a few months. Anyway, the rights to the vocals reverted back to myself and Alexandra in December, which was last month. So I decided to take a look at the vocals and make a new version of To Open Up, using only the vocals and nothing else from the track. So the initial track was 140 beats per minute, old school sort of trance track. I didn't want to do the same thing again. I want to do something different. Now 140 beats a minute is perfect for dubstep and breaks as well, really, but I decided I didn't really want to go with that. I wanted to do a liquid drum and bass sound because I really like the sound of the sort of drum and bass beats, but with the chilled tunes and pads and things over the top, nice chords over the top. So first thing I did was put up the vocal, which is here. Let's turn everything off so you can hear what it sounds like. 140 beats per minute initially, which is that. So it sounded like this.
All of it undone, echoes in my head. Track it down and listen to it someday.
Now, the good thing about it is I recorded that vocal in my front room, actually, with no vocal booth or anything, through a mic into a little hardware compressor. But it's actually quite a nice, clean recording. So when it comes to time stretching it in Studio One, which already has good time stretching algorithms, it does it quite nicely without any artifacts, because there's no harmonies or effects to process or anything like that. So all I had to do initially was right-click on it, select file tempo. That was 0 at the time. Tell the computer, tell Studio One that it was 140 beats per minute, and then it would automatically warp it to whatever tempo I choose. So I chose 174 beats per minute because that is a standard drum and bass tempo, 174 beats per minute. So it sounds like this.
All of it undone, echoes in my head. Track it down and listen to it someday.
So you can hear there's minimum distortion on there. That's pretty good. Anyway, I'd got I subscribed to Computer Music Magazine, and it's always got some good drum loops on there. And one I particularly liked, the drum and bass one, was this one here. Just loop it. Anyway, so it's 2 bars long. I thought it was quite nice, and I'm putting it together with the vocals. I thought it went quite well because it came out like this.
All of it undone, echoes in my head.
So that was basically the backbone for the track. That was my starting point, really. So the first thing I do is, when I make music, I'm not like a great musician who has a massive composition in my brain, which I just have to get out on paper. I'm not really like that. What I do is, I have an idea, and I have a theme and an atmosphere and an emotion that I want to evoke. And then I build the track with the aim of sort of fulfilling that atmosphere and emotion, if that makes sense. So the last few tracks I've done, which are sort of queued up for release at the moment, it sounds a bit mental, but I've really been inspired by sort of outer space and space travel. So that sort of translates into lots of long reverb tails, nice shiny sounds, deep sounding basses, things like that. And I decided I wanted to do a similar thing for this liquid drum and bass. I wanted to have a nice sort of chilled bass line and tune and chords, but obviously with the 174 beats per minute high tempo drum loop. So that was my starting point. So I had the drum loop down. I just initially put it down at the bottom of the track like that, and I decided just to bring up some reverb on the vocals and to EQ them as well. So I used the stock EQ from Studio One on the vocals, basically cut out the low end and give a bit of a boost around 5,000 hertz, which makes it sound like this.
Track it down and listen to it someday.
So you can see it just gives it a tiny boost. I compressed it as well. I mean, I'd already compressed it when I recorded it, but I gave it a little bit of compression, 2:1, and a 5 decibel gain, just to squash it a little bit more so that it popped out over the top of the instruments. Not too much though. And I set up a reverb and delay send channels over here. I use Valhalla Room for all my reverbs. They're really nice, quite cheap as well, but it sounds really good. I use a preset called Bright Space Cathedral, and then after it I just EQ'd the bottom out so that any reverb tails have no low frequencies. When I'm doing trance or progressive house, I'll always sidechain the reverb to the kick drum, but not on drum and bass. Don't think that'd sound too good. For the delay, I used Rob Hapen's delay, another preset, Vocal Fantasy 01, and I put the same EQ on it. So putting the reverb and the delay on it, the vocals sound like that.
All of it undone, echoes in my head.
And add in the drums.
Track it down and listen to it someday. I could've told.
So that sounds quite nice. Now, obviously with the drums, when I'm making trance or house, I tend to make my own drum loops using the Impact drum machine. I might put a percussion loop over the top, but I'll tend to do all the snares, hi-hats, kick drums myself. I didn't do that here because my starting point was a drum and bass drum loop. Anyway, I couldn't repeat the same drum loop for 6 or 7 minutes, so I used, didn't put it down as an audio track, I used Geist, which I bought last year and I haven't really used too much. This is the first track I've really used it in. So let's have a look. What Geist is, it's a beat looping, beat slicing or audio slicing tool, and all I did was drag the drum loop in here. It automatically sliced it up for me and put it onto all these little pads here. So kicks down here. Oh, hang on. Sorry, kicks here. Snares. Percussion, and then it laid it out, sliced it out into a pattern here, and then all I had to do was create patterns, variations on the theme by moving the little squares around and making different patterns. It's a bit like the Rex player in Reason. I'm sure you've probably used stuff like this before. So I came up with basically 16 bars of drum loops or variation on a theme, which sounded like this. And that was my starting point really. So I had played my new drum loops against the vocals.
All of it undone, echoes in my head.
So the next stage was basically to come up with a bass line. This took me a bit of time because my first attempt didn't sound quite right. What the bass line has to do is support the vocals. Well, that's what I wanted it to do. Obviously, you can have it to support a chord progression or the other way around, but what I wanted it to do was to support the vocals. Now, one trick in Studio One, which I didn't use here because I didn't have to, but something which I've done in the past, is if you've got a vocal and you're struggling to work out what key it's in or what notes the singer's singing, this is a good trick. So you get the vocal, put it in a channel here. So here it is. And I want to work out what notes the singer's singing. Right click, edit with Melodyne, which is built into Studio One, and then the notes for the singer will come up here. That's the first thing to do, and you can see what they're singing here, mainly around E. Now, what you can do though is then create an instrument track, which is basically a MIDI track. Drag the audio down, and you'll have the notes that the singer sang right there. So that's pretty cool. You can see again it's based around E. So then you'll know that you probably want to have a lot of E in the bass line. It's not a lot of music theory in there, but it works. It's easy. It's simple. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so the first bass line I came up with sounded a bit like this one. But some of the notes were up on the E up here. So it was going up and down. It sounded nice, but it sounded a bit too frenetic, and I wanted something a bit more laid back. So I ended up with having the notes down on the low E here and going up basically to a D and an A on the way down. Now I wanted a nice warm sound, and I recently bought the Spire synth by Reveal Sound, which is excellent. And there's a preset there called Beatitude, which I think is on the second menu, second patch bank. It came with reverb, which I removed, and that was pretty much it. I've compressed it a bit. In fact, I think that's just the default compressor settings. So I've just compressed it a little bit. I put it into a bus, but we'll get onto that later on because I mix it with another bass. Now, in drum and bass, the mixing is a bit different from house and trance, where you're going to have a really solid kick drum in house and trance. And what I tend to do is have a really solid kick drum and try not to play the bass notes at the same time as the kick drum in general, so that you haven't got the two low frequencies conflicting. In drum and bass, it's all about the bass. The drums have got to be punchy, but they don't have to be deep. They don't have to have a really big bottom end, because it's the bass that you want to do that. So the bass, I've made sure sort of really goes down to 50 hertz. The kick drum, which I'd normally have around 50 hertz, the low end in a trance track, is probably going to be a bit higher than 50 hertz in a drum and bass track. So you really want the bass to be the lowest and the kick drum to sit a little bit above that. And as long as you've got a punchy snare with a nice snap to it, a nice bit of body, maybe around 200 hertz, 100 to 200 hertz, you're going to have quite a nice sounding mix. So what I had at that point was my bass line, my vocals, and just Geist playing the drums. So it sounded like this. Now, at this point, I realised that obviously Geist, the drum loop playing by itself, is going to sound a bit underpowered, basically, and that I need to reinforce the kick drum and the snare. So I turned to the Impact drum machine, which I use all the time, and basically loaded up a kick, loaded up a snare, and loaded up another snare. Both of these snares are being run through the room reverb, which I've used as an insert. Room reverb is a Studio One native reverb plugin, and I've used it as an insert on the snare channel. So this snare is quite high with snap, and this snare is providing a bit of body down below, so to speak. Right, let's get the mixer up a bit. Okay, so without any, I've put some processing on here. So I've put on the tri-comp on the snare drum, which is I've used a bit of parallel compression on there. I've just used one of the presets, snare drum pop. I've used Supercharger, which was a free download over Christmas from Native Instruments, and I've used the preset punchy snare, and I've fiddled about a bit with the settings. I've EQ'd out the bottom end, and there's the room reverb. And what I've done is I've basically mirrored the Geist pattern. So whenever there's a kick drum playing in Geist, I've mirrored that in Impact, and the same with the snares. So it sounds like this. So this is Geist by itself, and then with Impact. So now there's a lot more body. There's a lot more body now to the drums. I'll turn it off again. There's a lot more body. There's a lot more punch. So that's the drums done. The rest of the drums I've pretty much just used loops. There's a shaker there. There's some percussion. I'll come on to that in a bit. I know I'm saying a lot. I apologise for that. Um, so all I've done is put in a load of shaker loops and things and taken the bottom end out of them. So it's starting to come together a little bit now. So I've got the drums playing, I've got the vocals here, and I've got the single, at the moment, bass line, which sounds like this. Now, one thing which I did next, which I don't normally do on a bass line, and I think it works here, but I mean we'll see at the end of the track whether I think it's still working, is I've added a bit of stereo width to the bass, which is something you don't really want to do normally. You just want the bass in the centre. And the way I did that was to mirror the patch and mirror the notes being played by the first bass line, and just copy it out again. Use the same patch, Beatitude. But what I've done is I've used a mid-side processor to completely mute the mids. So there's no sound coming down the centre now, and I've increased the gain on the left and right by 2 decibels. So it sounds like this, and I'll show you what it sounds like. Let's unsolo everything. So this is what it would sound like normally, and then I've removed the mids. So I've just got sound coming out the side. I've EQ'd it, so I've removed some of the frequencies around 1000 Hertz. There wasn't much there because it's a bass line, but there was a little bit of grit at the top end, and I didn't want that. I just wanted a really warm, smooth sound, so I got rid of that. I've used binaural pan as well, actually, to increase the width a bit more, and I've used a limiter, the Oxford limiter. I've basically used it as a compressor, to be honest. So now we've got the bass line complete. I mixed it into a bus as well, so both basses are going into one bus. They've both got slightly different effects on, but on the bus itself I've used the Waves R-Bus R-Bass stereo booster thing, which was free over the Christmas period from Waves. And all it does is add some harmonics up top, I think. It gives a nice rounded sound to the bass. I've compressed it again. I haven't really fiddled with those settings very much, and I've just EQ'd. I've rolled off the very low end, because that's just energy that you're not going to hear, and it sucks it out of the mix. I've given a little boost around 70 Hertz, something like that. Okay, so now the mix is sounding like this. So I've got the backbone started, really. So this is the first verse, from here up to here, and then from here to here is the chorus. So you can see that I switch it up when the chorus comes in. Now I wanted it all quite simple at the beginning, so all I've done is I've gone to Omnisphere and loaded in a pad, Ashes and Snow, which is a preset. I've removed the reverb, so I've disabled it because I don't want lots of different reverbs coming in, because it doesn't make it cohesive. I've just routed that again. The reverb which I've used on that is, I've just routed it to the Valhalla Room one. So, and what I've done is I've got it playing some chords which support the vocals. So all I did was play the vocals and then get on my keyboard and play some chords that supported the vocals. And you don't even need a keyboard to do it, you can just draw it in, to be honest. It's quite easy to do. So that was sounding like this. Let's just have the vocals and the pad. All of it undone, echoes in my head. And I've EQ'd out the bottom frequencies in the pad. So I just played along all the verse and all the chorus, just changing up the chords. So just some simple chords which support the vocal line. The pad has got a lot of movement in it anyway. What I'd normally do with the pad is maybe automate the filters, mess around with it just to create some movement in the pad, but this pad's got quite a lot of nice movement in it anyway, so I've left it. I haven't really touched it. The only thing I've done is automated the volume so that the volume increases as it comes in. So it starts off silent basically, and then it increases. Now, one thing which I've learned over the years to do is don't automate the volume using the mixer faders. So don't right click here and edit volume automation, because what will happen is if you need to reset everything later on, or alter your volume overall later on, you're going to end up with an automation mess. So just use something like Studio One's mix tool and automate the gain, and then you can mess around with the faders as much as you want afterwards, but your relative increase or decrease in volume in gain will stay the same using the mix tool. So that's something which I recommend to do. So what next? So what we've got the pad coming in, and it sounds all like this now. Okay. Okay, we've heard that before. So the final bit, today anyway, is just adding and changing up the chorus, and also what I've done with the vocals here. So I came to the chorus, and I needed to add some interest to the track. And what I did was listen to, I had a couple of ideas that I wanted to put in there anyway. One thing which I already had in my head was these notes, these pluck notes here, which are very simple. It's just 4 notes there. So I knew I wanted to put that in anyway, so I played that in on the keyboard. And the rest of the stuff was what I did was just listen to what I had. So this stuff up here over and over again until ideas popped into my head, and then I put them in. So the first thing I did was have the those little notes there. So and then I wanted something to really push the chorus along, so sort of up the tempo. But as I said, I wanted it still to be quite laid back, so I didn't want anything frenetic or aggressive. So I thought an ARP would do. Now, I didn't want the ARP to play lots of notes either. I just wanted to play one single note. Again, just to keep it all quite low key. So I found this in Omnisphere. Clicky Signs 2, it's a preset. But what I did was wipe the ARP that they had, and I came up with my own pattern. Which sounds like this. And in the context of the mix, it sounds like this. So that's quite subtle. In fact, as this is a work in progress, I may increase the volume of that. I'm not going to do it now because I'm doing this tutorial on headphones, and I never ever mix on headphones. So the final thing that I put in was this fairy harp, which again is a preset from Omnisphere, and I think there was a reverb on here, which again I've removed, and I've routed it to my own reverb, and I just played in a few notes on the keyboard, so it came out like this. So again, that's really simple. One thing you might have noticed is that throughout this, I haven't done much EQing or compressing. In that, I've used EQ. I've used quite a lot of EQs, you can see, but I haven't. My curves are all very simple. It's mainly just removing the bottom end. And what I've learned is that the most important thing is sound selection, or sculpting your sound in the first place. If you're then spending hours afterwards making really elaborate EQ curves, it's in my experience, more than likely that you've just got the wrong sound for the mix. I'll just start again with a different sound, because you end up with millions of EQs and compressors, and it's just a bit of a mess. So sound selection is really important. The very final thing with these few flourishes for the vocals up here. And all that is, it's I've taken a little bit of the first verse, chopped it out, I've reversed it, added a long reverb tail using event effects down here. So added in Van Haleroom, put in a long reverb tail, bounced it down, and then I've reversed it. So you got this nice sort of riser effect coming in on the vocals. So I've done that on that one. On this one here, I've used the X tremolo to automate the volume, so you get this nice choppiness here. So it sounds like this. And then I'm coming into the next section here. I mean, this is all quite basic now. This is the next bit that I'll work on. Some sort of breakdown. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to go with that yet. And that's pretty much it for now. I don't know if I know I've been rambling for a while. So well done if you've got to the end of this without falling asleep. The next instalment, hopefully, maybe I'll finish the track and I can talk about how I did that. If you've got any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you again soon.